constant feeling reigns over the 130-plus year history of NC State Wolfpack football. Hope. And when there's hope, well, Pack fans can always relate. Pack family, time for a true look at your team. Expert analysis, special guests, and a Carter Finley-sized bag full of X's and O's. Let's get hooked up for Pack Therapy. Here are your hosts, Tim Donnelly and Wolfpack great Mike Glennon.
Pack Therapy Podcast. I'm Tim Donnelly. As you just heard, my co-host Mike Glennon joining me as always. Another Wolfpack win, and it is there's a formula to this one. So I'm interested to see if Mike saw the same things that I saw watching that one back. But first, as always, like, subscribe, find us everywhere podcasts can be found. Tell your friends about us. We would greatly appreciate it. And we have a double dose of Glennon on this show, with it being Virginia Tech week. We have Sean Glennon, former starting quarterback, ACC championship game MVP for the Hokies, joining us later on in the show, that being Mike's brother. So a little brotherly rivalry coming up on the show in just a few minutes. We'll start with kind of where everything started last week, the quarterback position. Brennan Armstrong led the team in rushing, second straight week, even though he didn't start the previous week. Threw for 111 kind of efficient passing yards, a touchdown. What was your reaction to the 2.0 era of Brennan Armstrong?
The first thing is I was just so happy for him. Like, I think all of NC State, the fan base, the team has kind of rallied around this guy now, and it was just like, I felt like I was almost nervous for him. Like, I wanted him to play well just for what he's been through the past couple of weeks, and he went out and played really well. I think he did more with his legs than his arm, but that first touchdown pass was arguably probably the best pass of the season. I think he threw maybe an even better one. I think it was against who was the VMI game? VMI, okay, the seam. But I thought he threw a great ball. I mean, it was a little risky, and he let it rip, put that back shoulder on that rollout, and then he was just so efficient with his legs, and he looks like a guy that's running, you know, with a purpose. And again, he played really well. I was happy to see it. I mean, we can't get too crazy. Yep. He was efficient. It was you're looking at 12 for 17, 111 yards. It wasn't like he was throwing bombs all over the field, but he played well enough to win, and that's kind of the formula with this team is at the quarterback position. You just need to have a winning performance. You don't necessarily need to win the game for the team. It
was cool, going back to what you said, where it was like a good moment for him. It was cool watching him go to the sideline after that first touchdown pass, because it felt like everybody, like his teammates, coaches, everybody was like us going, gosh, I really hope this guy plays well, because it could go south fast if he doesn't, and we have so much turmoil. And he made that throw, and everyone was kind of like, all right, way to go, Brennan. And it just like you said, I'm happy for him. I'm glad he got that moment. And I'm still holding out hope that he's going to have that. And now quarterback for the NC State Wolfpack, Brennan Armstrong, at home, where all the good vibes are still flowing, which obviously you have to take care of business against Virginia Tech to get that moment on the road. I want to talk to you about these similarities, because one thing I noticed, because the quarterbacks changed, and it felt like it was such a big difference. And to your credit, you immediately said, like, I don't think the offense is going to be that different under MJ or Brennan. They've changed the offense since Brennan the first time, but you weren't seeing anything he couldn't do. The defense allowed 6 points to both Miami and Wake Forest. They threw for less than 150 yards. I think it's like 111 and 140 yards in the two games. One touchdown passing in each game. There's a lot of like weird similarities between two games against two wildly different opponents. Like, you can't be more different even this year than Miami and Wake Forest, but it seems like State has found what they are, and they're just going to kind of, whoever the opponent is, right? Every coach loves to say it. It's about us. It's not about them, even though it is kind of about who you're playing. But they take whoever they're playing and turn it into, our defense is going to play well. We're going to ask the quarterback not to steer it off the road, and we're going to depend on KC Concepcion to make a couple big plays. Is I don't know, is that sustainable, where you can just kind of say, this is the cookie cutter game we play, and it doesn't matter who's on the other side?
I think you can, because, I mean, you look at what Clemson and Miami almost beats Florida State. Clemson beat Notre Dame, and NC State's played against them better than really anyone else. Now, granted, Clemson beat Notre Dame at home. Miami was on the road at Florida State, so
a little bit of context.
Yes, but at the same time, that is the formula. I think that's pretty evident that this is a defensive team, and the complementary football is by the quarterback kind of not messing it up and finding ways to get Casey the ball. And I think the other thing noteworthy about the defense, I was just kind of thinking it through, and I think this may be somewhat injury-related, but still the case. Now 2 weeks in a row, the quarterback after starting against NC State has been benched. Tyler Van Dyke got benched after playing NC State. Mitch Griffiths, I think he was kind of banged up.
They've played the carousel a little bit, and every time once somebody comes out, it's like, and his ankle's sore.
So I don't know what happened, but a little noteworthy that the defense is leaving scars on other teams' quarterbacks, and it's a broken record now, but you can't say enough about the defense. And I think finally, the past couple games, they haven't given up the big play, and all season long they played really well, but they gave up the big play, and they just haven't done that. And that's a credit to the coaching staff for getting the guys in the right spot. And also, I think the corners, the two corners.
I was just going to go right there.
I mean, having the
Aiden
two
White
of them
and Battle.
Teams are struggling to throw the ball down the field on them, and with the front seven that NC State has in those two corners, it makes for a tough matchup for opposing offenses.
It's another one of those similarities. After the Miami game, Coach Doran was saying, those two corners had a really good game. And then after the Wake Forest game, he's saying that's the best game they've played together. And it's like, well, if they keep doing this, he's going to have to come up with some new kind of compliment. But when you're Tony Gibson, the defensive coordinator, having two corners playing that well against ACC competition, it opens up everything, right? We talk about how, it's part of Gibson's DNA to kind of roll the dice every now and then. It's so much easier to feel comfortable doing that when there's corners that you don't feel like are a liability on an island. And at this point, not only are they not a liability over the last few weeks, they're like a strength. It's like, well, why would we throw safety help over those guys? That's wasting a resource. They don't need it because they're playing that well.
Yeah, when you have those two corners, it frees up the play callers. Yeah. He can call whatever he wants because he trusts them and he doesn't need to protect them. A lot of times when you're going to cover two or something like that, it's because you don't really trust your corners and you're trying to get basically – the receiver having two guys on him. I think another point that early in the season there were some injuries at the safety position. Those guys have stepped up.
A whole bunch of them, yeah.
The safety, it's called that for a reason. Is they're kind of the last safety valve, and they haven't given up the big play, and they're kind of that last line of defense. And so you have to give credit to those guys for stepping up because that was a position that early on we weren't sure how it was going to recover from those injuries.
The season. And actually, again, coaches will love this. So Coach Doran's going to really enjoy this first part of this podcast, assuming that, or of course, he listens to it, driving to work every day. You go into the bye week, you hear all right, 2 seasons, kind of different. They figured something out in the bye week, and I think the way Clemson plays almost helped them find themselves because Clemson this year very much is not a big play offense, which is wild to say, but they have talent. They're just more like 7 yards, 10 yards, 11. They're not a lot of 60-yard, and it feels like they, meaning NC State's defense, took advantage of that, right? And said they're not a big play offense. We're not going to give up any big plays, and then it worked, and they went, oh, well, let's just do that against everybody, and they've just the little thing of eliminating. An occasional 40, 50, 60-yard touchdown has really shored up one of the only holes from this defense early on in the season.
Yeah, that was the key in the beginning of the season, is particularly when you look back at the losses against Notre Dame, there was way too many big plays, and you kind of look at it now, and I kind of wish we were playing them later in the season because Clemson clearly looked like the better team against Notre Dame, and we clearly looked like the better team against Clemson. So you wonder how that would have gone now in Louisville for that matter too. Now there wasn't quite as many big plays in that one, but I think this defense has.
I mean, the Duke game was 2 big plays.
Right.
It was 1 pass, 1 run, and that was the extent of what they gave to that Duke offense.
And you look back to that Duke game, and I feel like that's going to be the game that you really wish you could have back. Defense gives up big plays, offense penalties, drops. And since that point, I feel like the offense has cleaned up the penalties, the defense has cleaned up the big plays, and really there hasn't been many drops better. And I do think we have to give the receivers some credit. It's still the KC Concepcion show, The receivers stepped up, even though it was not that many completions. I felt like that was the best game from the receiver position as far as making plays and really not making any drops.
The two more things I want to talk about before we get to the second part of the podcast and Sean. One is the college football playoff rankings. NC State not ranked. I'm gonna give you some facts, and these were pointed out by David Hale, who covers college sports for ESPN. State is the only 7 and 3 or better Power 5 team not ranked by the committee this week. Pack has wins over Clemson and Miami, which are far from the most impressive, but not the least impressive wins. Their losses, so State has only lost to the number 10 team in the country, Louisville, by 3, the number 19 team in the country, and a team that was number 17 at the time of the game. So you could argue they only lose to top 20 teams. They're 7 and 3. Every other Power 5 7 and 3 team in the country is ranked, and the cherry on top is NC State's athletic director is the chair of the committee.
Yeah, I know Boo has to step out of the room when they discuss NC State, but it almost makes you work if like you're almost being too honest and like
it's like when you're the coach of the Little League team and you're harder on your
Yes.
kid than you are on everyone else's,
Right.
so nobody can accuse you of nepotism.
Yeah, right. The favoritism. I don't know. Another surprise I'm sure we'll get to is that Virginia Tech's favorite this week. I was surprised to see that.
Yep.
But we have 2 weeks to prove that we should be in the top 25 and then get to a bowl game. So that had to take care of business this week against Tech, and then again playing a top 20 team in UNC next week. So they're still playing. I mean, I know in the media world you got to talk about these college football rankings. To me, they don't matter until the end because there's all these different scenarios.
Well, what you normally say is only the opinions inside this building matter. One of the opinions is from inside your building. It's your own athletic director. It's not like, these are all outside opinions.
Well, apparently he's got to leave the room. I don't know. But yes, I saw that
Then he's
stat
got
as
to
well.
be when he's in the room. He's got to be more harsh on everyone that
Right,
he is discussing.
right.
Who's number 25? Find their
Yeah,
flaws.
let's find all the other 7 and 3 teams. Let's go over those real quick.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to talk about NC State, but I'm just going to talk about how every 7-win Power 5 team right now is in the rankings. Last thing I want to talk about, finalists for the Nagurski Award, Peyton Wilson. This is just the point of the show where we say, that guy's really darn good. He's big, he's strong, he's fast, and I think he's had the best defensive player season in the country this year.
It'll be what my mind went to is a few years ago, Bradley Chubb won that, and if Peyton wins it, they retired Bradley Chubb's jersey almost immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Now Bradley Chubb was a top 5 pick, and I don't know if Peyton will be that, but it should be about what they do in college. And if Peyton wins that, does that mean number 11 is going to be hanging in the rafters?
On a previous episode, which you can find everywhere podcasts can be found, we talked with Naheem Hines, and he said, I don't want to see anyone wearing number 11 again. So there's, if you start floating it out there, Naheem starts floating it out there, you start getting all the former players with NFL experience, maybe they'll listen to that one. You heard Mike mention it. Virginia Tech favored this weekend. When you look at the gambling odds, we're going to bring somebody on who is very familiar with Virginia Tech, very familiar with Mike Glennon, and very familiar with gambling, quite frankly. Sean Glennon's going to join us next to talk about the Virginia Tech aspect of this weekend's game. Stick around just a few minutes. Pack Therapy Podcast back here, joined by our guest for this episode. As I said, we're doubling up with the Glennons. We have Mike Glennon, joined by former Virginia Tech quarterback, former ACC championship game MVP, Sean Glennon. Sean, welcome.
Hey, I've been waiting for an invite. I guess once a year. If we play each other once a year, I'll get one.
Tim's great with intros. Whenever he intros me, it feels like Joe Buck introing Troy Aikman.
Darn right. We got to get the slide in is what we should have done. You guys should have started off.
Yeah, the ACC championship MVP. I need to put that on my email signature or stuff like that. I don't get it enough unless Tim's intro me on a show. So I get a little boost.
Should I go further? Should I say it was 2007 and you were out dueling the number 3 overall pick in the upcoming draft, Matt Ryan? We could keep
Details
it rolling.
matter. Details matter.
Actually,
Tim.
we'll use this as resume because you just learned about it and it didn't get enough time to get talked about. Kyron Drones, the current quarterback for Virginia Tech, just broke your record for consecutive passes without an interception, which we learned you held about 20 minutes before the record was broken.
I learned as well. So I would have been bragging for the last 16, 17 years about it if I had known, especially any like Tech fan that gives me crap that I threw too many interceptions. That would have been my mic drop moment. But unfortunately, the broadcast is the first time I learned about it. And then 20 minutes later, he broke it. So it was very short-lived, my celebration.
And what was the other one last week? Consecutive games, 300 yards in a game?
Oh, yeah, it was the first one to like throw back-to-back 300-yard games. So, yeah, Kyron Drones is doing a lot of good things for Hokie Nation, but he's doing some terrible things to my legacy there.
Quickly here. Just to bring in the third Glennon sibling, I was talking with Katie, your sister, because shout out to Katie. She
shine. Got to give some shine.
I was dropping my son off there, and this week, or actually earlier today, I walk in and her daughter, who's both of your niece, walked out in a Virginia Tech dress. She's like, it's game week, it's real. I was like, okay, the lines, obviously she attended Virginia Tech also, so lines were drawn. And she looks at me, first question, this is, 8:25 in the morning. She looks at me and goes, now, why is Virginia Tech favored? I was talking to Mikey last week, and we, he was expecting State to be favored. Why is Virginia Tech the favorite in this one? So she's looking at betting lines. So I'll pose that question to you from your very own sister. Why are your Hokies favored over NC State?
Well, it's funny. I don't know if she also asked Mike, and I don't know why my mid-30s mom of three sister is asking multiple people, I guess, about the spreads in these games. But
because it's a rivalry week.
It was after Tech beat who would be last week? Boston College. That I got a text message that said, "What do you think the line will be next week?" I didn't even know she had that vocabulary. And I actually guessed, I said, I'm guessing NC State -2.5, -3 or something like that. So I was wrong as well. I guess that our offense has been rolling. I mean, we've been putting up points on the scoreboard, and that'll be probably the most interesting dynamic of the game is NC State's defense versus our offense. And can Kyron Drones really keep this up against a pretty proven defense? I was a little surprised, but I guess, recency bias, track record, and again, the fact that NC State hasn't been lighting up the scoreboard, maybe that played into the hand. But I was wrong. Like I said, I guessed NC State to be a 2 or 3 point.
Yeah, I think it's got to be Lane Stadium playing a big role in this. And
true.
Although Virginia Tech's been playing good, NC State has as well. I mean, they just beat Clemson, Miami, and dominated Wake Forest, and I was surprised by it for sure. But sometimes it's like
former Virginia Tech quarterback thinks
worrisome.
NC State should have been favored. Headline right there. There's the pull quote.
When Vegas has it that way, you start questioning yourself. You're like, what do they know that I don't? But what has been the biggest turnaround for Virginia Tech? I mean, not too long ago they lost to Marshall, who really has not had a great season, and I thought when Virginia Tech lost to Marshall, I'm like, this program is not on its way back up from where they've been the past couple of years. What's turned around?
Well, I don't even know if I'd use the last few years as a benchmark of any bragging rights. Obviously, it's been the end of the Fuente era, and then year one of Pry, and like you said, really, honestly, probably rock bottom was the first 4 weeks of this season. So to start off and
was there Rutgers, there was Purdue, there was Marshall. It was not.
Well, barely beat ODU.
Oh, right. Thorn in your
I
side.
guess that was like our Super Bowl because we've haven't been able to beat them lately. But then we lose to Rutgers, Purdue, and then, like you said, Marshall, who's, let's call a spade. They're not a very good football team. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm sitting from a distance talking to some of my former teammates and stuff like that. Like, goodness gracious, like, how did we get here? Like, how are we this bad? Like, how obviously the glory days may not be here, but we still want to, have a 7-5, 8-4 football team that's at least competitive in the ACC, and to be losing to, group of 5 schools, as a pretty heavy favorite. Really showing no signs of life in any of those games either. I mean, all three of those losses we deserve to lose. And, to be where we are now, 5-5, almost bowl eligible, actually a mathematic formulaic chance of making the ACC championship if a couple dominoes fall. I'll take it compared to where we were. And you asked the question, why? I mean, I see two things. Number one is the obvious one that we've already kind of touched on. It seems like we got a guy at quarterback. Nothing against Grant Wells. I've actually developed a small relationship with Grant. He's a great kid, great young man, but he just wasn't sparking that offense. And Kyron has. I mean, just look at the point totals, the last 3 or 4 games and the dynamics that he brings to the offense. And then the other thing is, it seems like the Brent Pry that we brought in to be the defensive guru is starting to show. I don't know the exact numbers, but we've had a ton of sacks in recent games. I think that even there was some statistic that we have since the Syracuse game, I think it was, we have the most sacks in the ACC. So I think the defense seems to be waking up. We're controlling the line of scrimmage a lot more. We were getting gashed, especially in the running game early in the season. So maybe 1.5 years in, the coaching is starting to permeate. It takes time. I'm no dummy to think that you walk in and day one, the program buys in and you've got the guys coached up and running the scheme the way that you envisioned it. But it seems like there's some buy-in now. It seems like there's a lot more. It just looks like a better coached football team. It was kind of it was tough to watch at times. Penalties, things like that were just belaboring us. And it just seems like a much better coached football team. And like I said, it seems like we got a guy taking the snaps.
I want to, granted that's Virginia Tech insight. I want to use one of your experiences to give us some insight into one of the crazier situations I've covered at State. Knowing you and knowing you like behind the scenes and personally, I don't know if you ever talked about this publicly, but you are one of the only people probably on the planet that have told the coach, I want a red shirt this year, don't play me, which is what MJ Morris did. Granted, the context is different. There's shades of gray on both sides. But giving some background, you played your freshman year at Virginia Tech, burnt a red shirt, not a starter, but you appeared in games back when you couldn't play 4 games and keep your red shirt, which I think we all would have.
That would have been nice.
Yeah, would have been nice. Then your sophomore year, you're playing Duke, and this is Duke when they weren't great and Virginia Tech was in its heyday. So at halftime, it looks like you're going in, or I don't know the full situation, but you tell the coaches like, hey, I'd like to be here for 5 seasons. And I don't know if it was this, measured of a conversation. I'd like to be here for 5 seasons, so don't play me, which is a bold decision there, and it's the whole team versus personal and everything else. So what goes into somebody, because MJ Morris was the starter for 4 games and went 3-1 and helped turn the season around, then had that conversation, which is largely the difference. But kind of from your perspective, somebody that's told a coach, don't play me, I want to keep my red shirt, how do you react to seeing it happen on such a different scale?
Well, I guess I'll fill in the blanks real quick on my story. My freshman year, I backed up Brian Randall. Marcus Vick was suspended that year, and I think because they were so panicked about like what would happen if Brian were to go down, because the only quarterbacks left on the roster were myself and a guy named Corey Holt, who was also a freshman, a true freshman.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they just wanted to get me some reps, so I played garbage time at the end of games. And yeah, back then, back in the heyday, that burned your red shirt. This whole 4-game thing would have solved all my problems because I wouldn't have burned it the first year. But anyway, we go into year 2. I lose the starting job to Marcus, big surprise, and I'm back up again. And we're like pretty far into the season, 6-7 games. Now, I'll take part of the blame, probably something I should have brought up to the coaching, Coach Rogers, the rest coach in advance. But honestly, I'm 20 years old. I don't know what I'm doing. They probably should have talked about it with me too. So let's share the blame a little bit. But anyway, it's halftime of Duke. We're up, 1-0. And Coach Rogers basically comes up to me and says, get ready. We'll probably give Marcus one series in the second half, and then you'll take it the rest of the way. And yeah, I just, because kind of like, yeah, I don't think I want to do that. And he looked at me like I had two heads. And I said, I mean, I already burned a season last year doing this. I don't think I want to do it again. If I'm ever going, like if Marcus goes down and I'm going to be the starter, and here's probably the way I'll transition into your question. Yes, I'll burn the red shirt for sure. And I'll still prepare every week and stuff like that. And this is not me saying I want to, take a year off and kind of go on cruise control. But if it's just kind of hand off the ball, throw a couple quick routes at the end of games, like to me, that's not worth burning season. So anyway, Coach Rogers had a couple choice words for me that I won't repeat on air. He pulled Coach Beamer over, told him the plan. Coach Beamer, again, was not thrilled to be having this conversation at halftime of a game. We're about to take the field in 5 minutes, but they acquiesced. Corey ended up going in, and they, thank goodness, because the rest of the season, Marcus, stayed healthy, and so it would have been another kind of wasted year. Now, having said that, again, part of my conversation was if Marcus goes down and if like we truly need a new quarterback, I will 100% burn the red shirt. And so that's where the NC State situation is an interesting one. I mean, I know there's a little bit more at play behind the scenes and stuff, NIL stuff that I didn't have to deal with, but to be the starting quarterback, to be the guy, and then say, you know what, I'm going to take a back seat, respect my decision, right? Twitter. That to me is obviously a very odd decision. You guys probably know more of the details than I do, but it's got to be something that's not playing well in the locker room. I can't imagine that, because you're obviously putting yourself above the team. And yeah, I can't recall a situation. I was trying to rack my brain in college football, or probably any college sports ever, where a true starter that was depended on did something like this. So
I think that's where the communication aspect, like how the coaches didn't communicate that with you before the season even started. Like, hey, we're going to try to preserve your red shirt. We're not going to waste you in mop-up duty. That conversation should have happened well before in the locker room in the middle of while it's happening. And that's what I wonder about MJ is what were the communication? Dave Doran insinuated in his press conference when they were leaning towards benching Brennan, they said, do you want to play? Mm-hmm. And at that point, MJ said yes. And at that point, that's when you got to go.
Well, to me, the irony is what Sean was talking about is kind of exactly how State played it, because they were blowing out VMI and they didn't put in MJ Morris, which to me is kind of what Sean was asking for, right? Just don't burn the red shirt in mop-up duty, right? I don't want to go out there, like he said, hand the ball a couple times, complete a couple slants, so you say, oh, you got to throw it and get out of there. And then once you become the starter and the season turns around, by the way, you take over and go 3-1 on a team that was struggling. It's I have to imagine, to Coach Doran's credit, to everybody's credit, publicly it's been, we're going to honor his request and we still like MJ and all those things. The choice words that Sean wasn't willing to disclose from his quarterback's coach and the head coach, if it's a starter, I have to imagine it's the choice words for like a month rather than, the 4 minutes before you take the field at halftime. Did you feel, Sean, I'll ask this. Did you feel at all like it was an individual decision over a team decision, or was it almost like it's neutral on a team scale, so it's pro me because it's neutral for the team?
My decision?
Yeah.
Or
no, we're looking at yours.
My decision, yeah. I mean, what difference does it make if me or, Joe in the stands hands the ball off when we're up 40, right? So no, I didn't think I was at all putting myself above the team. Now, it was a selfish decision, but it wasn't a decision that I felt was detrimental to the team at all, because, and to Mikey's point, I did have the conversation, and I was at least self-aware enough during this moment where Coach Rogers and Coach Beamer were like, are you effing kidding me? Like, you choose to bring it up right now. And again, in fairness to me, like I should have almost said it back to them. Like, are you effing kidding me that why haven't we had this conversation? Right. But I did say in that conversation, like I said, I was self-aware to not be making it all about me or making the selfish decision. Like, hey, if something happens to Marcus, this deal is off, right? I'm ready to go. I'm going to prepare every week. Like, I will play. This is not me, like I said, taking like a gray shirt year, like a year off.
Let me just jump in and say it could have gone differently, because I tried the same thing my sophomore year, and I was a walk-on at the time, and they told me walk-ons that turn down playing time never get playing time, and I went, all right, let's go ahead and jump in.
I didn't know you had tried to fight it.
It was very, I mean,
a very short-lived
it was
debate.
It was very much like, no, this is not how this works. And I went, deal, all right, we'll see out on the field. It was a completely different beast. Quickly here.
But to Mikey's point, the part I want to bring up is, okay, so apparently this kid had a conversation with his coach. Like, okay, this quarterback struggling a little bit. We're thinking about mixing things up, putting you in. I mean,
I don't know how you name a starter and change a starter without talking to the guy you're naming a starter. That's the time where you raise your hand and say, like, you know, I mean, we've all been a part of quarterback competitions where, right, it's either the best meeting or the worst meeting when they're like, hey, you know, both of you come see me in the office, right? When you're being named the starter, that's when you raise the hand and say, I would rather not. It's hard to do after 4 games. Quickly here, we're running out of time, but there's more insight we can glean from you. From Brennan Armstrong's perspective, right? You've been the veteran that has to get called upon after maybe you thought your number wouldn't be called upon, and you go in there and have success. What is that emotional roller coaster from your memory like, where, you know, like I said, it's either the best meeting or the worst meeting, right? You go in and maybe you lose your job, then you go back in and you maybe get it back, then you go back in and who knows? You know, from Brennan's perspective, what advice can you give him for the last couple games of the year where he's back leading the show?
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually twice had that terrible Monday morning meeting. One time my junior year, where they handed the reins over to Tyrus for a few games, and then luckily, and I will say luckily, he sprained his ankle. I came back and I played best football of my life, and we went on to have a great season, win the ACC championship, as you mentioned, part of my business card. You know,
there you go,
MVP. So I'm going into the next year thinking, you know, I'm the man. I'm awesome. It's my team senior year, and then it happens all over again. And there's a changing of the guard in the middle of that season with Tyrod. So I've actually had it kind of taken away from me twice. So I experienced the roller coaster of emotions and the ego bruising that happens as a result of it. And you know, I don't think I have any magical advice other than you don't have to pretend like it doesn't stink, right? We all have you know, a short time to play this game, and we all have egos, and we all have our opinions on, you know, what we should be doing out there in our position on the team. And so it's really, really hard when that decision gets taken out of your hands and a coach says we're going to go in a different direction. And of course, I'm sure Brennan Armstrong, and to be fair, Grant Wells at Virginia Tech probably feels the same way to an extent. I mean, I know Brennan was more heralded and kind of had a stronger background, previous career. But, you know, the only solace I can say, or the only advice I would give them if I was talking to them directly, is both times that I had the rug, you know, pulled out from under me, opportunities came back around, both times due to injury. And, you know, it's your fault if you're not prepared for that opportunity and you're not going to make the most of it. And so it's okay to pout, and it's okay to feel sorry for yourself a little bit. But in between the lines at practice and in the games, you got to stay ready, because there's a, you know, real good chance that you're going to get an opportunity again. And it looks like Brennan's going to get an opportunity again. And if he would have checked out or transferred or, you know, whined and complained and stuff on social media, like he wouldn't be prepared for this moment. And, you know, he can end his career on a high note potentially.
Does Lane Stadium still give him the business because he used to wear a UVA uniform?
I didn't think about that, but that's a great point. I mean, I think Lane brings the noise no matter what, but yeah, they might have a little extra heat towards the former Wahoo.
Sean, we appreciate you for taking the time. As always, we'll check back in next time the Wolfpack and the Hokies match up again. All right.
Where are we on the schedule next year?
I don't know. I think now it's like every 3 years.
It's not a protected rivalry, so
All right, so I'll see you in 2026.
Exactly. Clear your schedule. Thanks, Sean.
All right, I'll put it on the calendar. Thanks for having me.